So, what's going on at board level at West Ham United? Over the past year, there's been a number of developments at senior level, which are leading fans and pundits to believe that Daniel Kretinsky is about to make his move in taking over the club outright, and that Gold and Sullivan are indeed about to sell up. I'll go through these developments as best I can in kind of a chronological order. Of course, the first of these occasions occurred in November 2021, just over a year ago, where Kretinsky, the Czech billionaire, bought 27% stake in West Ham United, or West Ham Holdings Limited, to be more precise. It created a lot of excitement and speculation amongst fans that this was the start of a takeover of the club that would finally see the back of Gold, Sullivan, and Brady. Many fans have not had a great relationship with GSB. We were promised many things, but the delivery of most of those hasn't really materialized. Many will say none of them have materialized. We were promised a world-class team playing in a world-class stadium, but what we got in return was one season of championship football rather than a season of Champions League. We spent the last 12 years mostly languishing in the bottom half or the wrong half of the table in the Premier League. And the London Stadium itself has had more than its fair share of issues since we moved there. Granted, things have improved over the past couple of seasons, but many fans still long for the day when GSB finally sell up and leave. The second development is, of course, the London Legacy Development Corporation and the so-called levy or tax that GSB would have had to pay should they sell the club before March 2023. There was a clause inserted in the leasing of the stadium that if GSB were to sell up for £300 million or more, they'd have to pay a levy of up to 20% from the profits that they made. As we all know, the London Legacy Development Corporation sort of runs the stadium and surrounding complex and is accountable to the Mayor of London. So to get such a windfall would have been a fantastic achievement for them. But it doesn't look like there's going to be a sale before March 2023, or even at all, maybe. But because Kretinsky bought into the club, fans just speculated that he would bide his time, possibly increase his stake in West Ham Holdings over that time, and so that he'd be in a position come the beginning of April 2023 that he'd actually buy the club outright. Another development in the whole saga is that when Kretinsky bought into the club, he brought along with him 3 of his business associates to join him on the boards of West Ham United. You see, there are 2 boards. There's West Ham Holdings Limited, as well as West Ham United Football Club Limited. So who's on which one? On West Ham Holdings Limited, up until recently, we had David Sullivan Jr., Jack Sullivan, David Gold, Dan Cunningham, the son-in-law of David Gold, Albert Tripp-Smith, Daniel Harris, and Terry Brown, who between them have a 1.1% stake in West Ham United, Daniel Kretinsky, and as I've mentioned, just until recently, Pavel Horsky. Now, normally you'd need a 10% stake in the club. So why are Daniel Harris and Terry Brown with only a 1.1% stake on that board? Well, when Gold and Sullivan took over, they needed investment, and they did a deal at the time, back then, for Harris and Brown to provide funds, and in return, they'd get seats on the board. Then we've got West Ham United Football Club Limited, and most of these people that are on the holdings board are the same people. Primarily Sullivan again, David Sullivan Jr., Jack Sullivan, David Gold, Dan Cunningham, and Albert Tripp-Smith. Now, in addition, Karen Brady and Andy Mollett, who is the Chief Finance Officer at West Ham United, are on this board. And also is Tara Warren, who is the Executive Director for Marketing and Communications at the club as well. Now, I mentioned that Kretinsky brought along with him 3 associates. The first was Pavel Horsky, who until recently was sitting on West Ham Holdings Limited. And then we've got Peter Mitka, and again until recently, Marek Spurney. Are you with me so far? Now, you've noticed here that Daniel Kretinsky doesn't sit on this board, which is why I kind of think that West Ham Holdings Limited is the board that kind of has the more power, has the decision making, whereas this board kind of deals with things probably on an operational level more than anything else. Now, until recently, the next development, which again has got fans speculating as to what Kretinsky's up to, is a recent reshuffle of his associates. He brought in to the company, into West Ham United, another gentleman called Jiri Svarc, who I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a moment. Now, since August 2022, the board, the West Ham Holdings board, has had one change. Got the same people, Sullivan Jr., etc., etc. But instead of Pavel Horsky, we now have Jiri Svarc, who is a representative on the board of West Ham Holdings Limited. Pavel Horsky has moved down to West Ham United Football Club Limited, and he's taken over Marek Spurney's place, who's left the club altogether. So there's been one change on West Ham Holdings Limited, which is Jiri Svarc taking the place of Pavel Horsky, and there's been one change at West Ham United Football Club Limited board, Pavel Horsky taking the place of Marek Spurney. Now, why do it? What's the point of Daniel Kretinsky bringing in Jiri Svarc? What's he to West Ham, and why not just keep the same people on? And what difference will it make? Well, Svarc is an interesting character because, as many people already know, Jiri Svarc, his background is with JP Morgan. He joined JP Morgan in 1999, where he worked in the London office to advise on insurance and banking for the area that he covered, which is Central and Eastern Europe, as well as Austria. Since 2004, he's been a member of the Committee for Securities Listings for the Prague Stock Exchange. In essence, basically, what this role does is simply ensure that a company that wants to list on the stock exchange, it will be the application will be scrutinized, which Jiri Svarc is part of. Svarc will look at things like the financial position of the company, making sure it's sound, making sure about solvency and liquidity positions, and so on. However, what Svarc also has is 14 years experience as an M&A consultant in the region that he covers. And he's recently played a key role in several major transactions, such as, for example, being involved in the Kretinsky's energy company, EPH, taking over or buying out SPP for 2.6 billion euros. An M&A consultant stands for mergers and acquisitions. So could it be, possibly, that this is why Kretinsky has brought Svarc in to West Ham United? Could it be that he's positioning someone like Svarc's experience to look at a buyout of West Ham, using his expertise to buy the club out? Now, that doesn't mean that Kretinsky is going to buy the club, but there's a possibility that with a potential buyout, Svarc's experience could come into play. The next development on all this stuff is a mystery surrounding David Gold's shares. Now, from our understanding, David Gold holds 25.1% of shares in West Ham United. Up until recently, 8% of those shares were in Gold Holdings, or GGI Holdings, which was controlled by David Gold. But earlier this year, around 8 months ago, GGI Holdings was made voluntary insolvent. So it closed down, which seems to suggest that those 8% shares of West Ham have gone somewhere else. Sold on, maybe, but to who, we don't know. If Gold has sold them from his portfolio, it brings the his overall stake down from 25.1% to 17.1%. Now, rumor has it that Kretinsky has a first option to buy any shares from any other shareholders. If that's the case, and if Kretinsky has bought this 8% stake, it means that his stake in West Ham United has gone from 27% to 35%. But this still wouldn't give him overall control of West Ham United because, as you may or may not know, David Sullivan still holds a controlling interest in the club with a 38.8% stake. So it would certainly take Kretinsky close to that, but it certainly wouldn't give him overall control of the club. Now, Trip Smith, who now has 8% stake in the club, may come into play here. Trip Smith, along with Kretinsky, can put their resources together. And if Kretinsky has increased his stake to 35%, plus the 8% stake with Trip Smith, that takes it to over 42%, or 43% to be precise. Now, 43% will have an overall control of what happens at West Ham United. If Smith and Kretinsky came into play together, then all of a sudden you're looking at the possibility of them being able to control whether West Ham sell the club or not. So let's get back to Svarc and the role he may play. Now, as I've said, we've heard many times before that Kretinsky is an investor and not necessarily looking to take the club over overall. But as I've said, he could have a say along with Trip Smith as to what happens with the club. And could it be that we've heard most recently that Sir Jim Ratcliffe has an interest in buying a Premier League club, that maybe they're preparing between them to sell the club to Ratcliffe? It could possibly be a massive option for them. Ratcliffe is an interesting character. We know he's a Man United fan, but he's got a season ticket at Chelsea. I don't know. You work that out for yourself. He's worth about £5 billion, and he's got a sports franchise which includes a number of different football clubs and like Mercedes, Formula One, etc., etc. He owns FC Lausanne Sport, a Swiss Super League club, and in 2019 he bought French club Nice. Now, you'd think, wow, if Ratcliffe came in, maybe we'd have the investment we'd need in order to elevate West Ham United to the next level. Well, let's hold that thought for 1 second, because Ratcliffe being worth about Ratcliffe being worth about £20 billion has another apparent interest in buying Man United, but at the price of £5 billion, that's quite a lot of his wealth to go to one club. Whereas West Ham being valued at something like £800 million might certainly be a proposition that might interest him. He said, that with his sports franchises, one of the things that's missing is a Premier League club. And there's been rumours about him looking at, he tried to buy Chelsea when that was being sold. Now that Man United are being sold, there's apparent interest in him building a consortium to buy that. And there's been other rumours like maybe buying out Wolves, etc., but also West Ham United. Now, let's go back to the thought about if he came to West Ham United, that maybe he could invest in some big name players in order to elevate us to the next level. Well, let's look at Nice, shall we? Last season, they bought 2 players. Their most expensive one was Sofiane Diop from Monaco for £20 million. And a player that we've been linked to in the past, Gaëtan Laborde from Rennes, bought him for £13 million. But he's also brought in 2 players, or he's also financed the bringing in of 2 players on a free. Aaron Ramsey and Ross Barkley, both come in free. Again, both linked to us. And many West Ham fans have said in the past, why would we want either of them? Ross Barkley hasn't proved himself, keeps getting injured. Aaron Ramsey is now at the wrong age to actually prove anything in the Premier League. So those people that think that Ratcliffe might come into West Ham United and start spending a hell of a lot of money might get a bit of a surprise. So what next? Well, I think the next part of the jigsaw is we're going to find out soon what David Gold has done with his shares in the company that he had, the 8% shares. Those have got to be registered in Companies House very soon. So we will be able to know exactly who's got those shares. There's a feeling that quite possibly he may want to keep them in the family and may want to do the same thing as Sullivan has done, where they go into the family. As I've mentioned, Dan Cunningham, his son-in-law, is already on the board of directors at West Ham United. And he may want, those shares to go to him or possibly go to one of his daughters who run his other business interests. So there's that. If he has sold them to Kretinsky, I think that will be interesting to see. But also, if he sold them to Kretinsky, all it means for Kretinsky is that he'll make a massive return if the club is sold, because already on his £150 million stake, if the club is sold at 800 million, Kretinsky would have made a cool £66 million in just over a year and a month. But with a 35% stake, of course, that percentage goes up. That profit goes up quite substantially. So we're going to find out soon because it's got to be registered at Companies House as to what David Gold has done with his shares. But I think the biggest part of the jigsaw may yet to be revealed, and we're going to have to wait until April 2023 to discover whether Svarc has any involvement in the selling of West Ham United in the future. Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, do hit the like, subscribe, and bell notification to let you know when I'm next on. I'll come back with another show pretty soon. Much appreciated. Do leave your comments below, which will be appreciated. And I'll see you all very soon.